Turn this up. Okay, so this is the last class for the Mashiach series, and we basically understand that the goal in our lives is to get to the end, which is the Messianic time. So that's where we're going with all this. We remember that we had first the physical goal, which was basically understanding what it means, the Messianic times, and all the different prophecies that we foresaw. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to share the screen now and remind you of all these different prophecies so we can connect the end to the beginning. Okay, so let's see. Share. Here we go. So here is so go back to the first book, if anyone has the book. I mean, the first part of the book, first chapter. This can happen, and this is text number 2 at the way beginning of the book. Actually, yeah, text number 2. But let me just see what page it's on. Doesn't say the pages here actually. Okay, so it's text number 2 in the first part of the book. Does anybody want to read it?
Sure, I can read it, but I can read it from the screen, right?
Yeah. Okay, no problem. Can you see it, or you want me to make it bigger?
Yeah. No, I'm good.
Okay.
In that era, there will be no famine or war, no envy or competition. For goodness will be in abundance, and all delights will be as commonplace as dust.
Okay, does that sound like a miracle to you?
As of today, yes.
It sounds like a miracle to you. So in other words, if there's no famine, does that sound like a miracle?
Yeah.
Okay, so no famine at all, but there's very little famine right now. How about war? Can you imagine there being no war?
It would be lovely, but
is it possible to happen naturally, do you think?
Probably not.
Okay, that's your
that's my opinion.
Your pessimism getting in there, but that's okay. How about envy and competition? Okay, so that doesn't, in other words, these things can happen, but it doesn't have to be a miracle. It can be something that might make us want to do those things, right? In a way.
Yeah.
Okay, so go on to continue on text 3.
Okay. All right. On that day, there will no longer be an impoverished person in the house of God.
Okay, so in other words, no one's going to be poor. Okay, which sounds a little bit more like it. I mean, no war is a little hard for us to imagine, but not being poor, we can kind of understand that. Like, look at all the people in this country that are poor. They still have food.
Right.
Okay, go on to text 4. Continue.
God will give rain for your seed, with which you shall sow the soil. He will give you plentiful bread, the yield of the land, and the land will be rich and abundant.
Can you imagine a person coming to this world now from 500 years ago? What will he think when you say these words that God will give rain for your seed in which you shall sow? In other words, he'll give you as much bread as you want. Isn't that what we have now?
Yeah.
Right. We have plenty of bread. We have plenty of food. There's an abundance of food. People that don't have food have food stamps. So a person coming from 500 years ago will look at this and say, wow, this is Mashiach's times, right?
Right.
Okay, go on to the next one.
Okay, the next one. At that time, the eyes of the blind will be opened, and the ears of the dead will be unstopped. At that time, the lame shall skip like a deer, and the tongue of the mute shall sing.
Okay, so we do see certain innovations nowadays that covers those things, right? We talked about that already, right?
Totally, yes.
Yes. Okay, so now the next one, continue.
Nation shall not lift sword against nation, nor shall anyone train for war anymore.
It's a possibility that that can happen in the future. It hasn't happened yet, but we can see it happening in a natural way. Maybe,
Maybe.
right? And then elimination of crime. Read that one.
No longer will violence be heard in your land, nor robbery or devastation within your borders.
So we do still see violence, but the violence is a lot less than what we did see 200 years ago. We talked about this in the first one, remember? Okay, so this is basically saying that, yes, these things have happened. Yes, these things are going on, right?
Correct.
And we understand that it's a possibility that these things can happen in a natural way. Now, that's the physical about Mashiach, and then we're looking at the spiritual. What's the spiritual about Mashiach? Who remembers?
Everybody will love everybody.
Okay, right? In other words, there'll be unity. Actually, you jumped the gun. Excellent. There will be unity, right? And what else? What other? And the Torah and mitzvahs will be what? Will be. Remember, we talked about it. That we will fulfill all the Torah mitzvahs, right? Not just the ones that we could only fulfill now, because we will have the Beis Hamikdash. Now, this beginning of the Messianic era happened 3,333 years ago, and it's been going till now. That's a long time, right?
Right.
It's like it's like God leaving us for so many years, and now he wants to come back. You know, it's not easy. But guess what? All these other nations have disappeared, but we have continued to stay. Right?
Right.
Continued to stay. Everyone has disappeared and we continued. You know, the Egyptians are gone. The Babylonians, you don't know anybody that's from Babylonia. I mean, they're not around anymore. And the Greeks, what is the Greeks? It's a small little city. They're not around either. You know that if somebody came from 1,000 years ago to Greece, what would they see? They would say, oh, this is my great Greece. You know, this is my beautiful city in Greece. There's nothing left there. And if somebody would come back to Rome, let's say the Caesar would come back to Rome, what would he see? He would just see a figment of, like, you know, beautiful museum of everything that he was meant for. Nothing is left of that. It's gone. But what would you think? This is interesting. You would think that if Moshe Rabbeinu came back to Israel now, would they still be speaking Hebrew? What would he say? Shalom Aleichem. And what would the person answer? Aleichem Shalom. Right? Because we're still the same people. We haven't changed. No matter what, even though some of us maybe don't do the same traditions anymore, but everybody knows what Shabbos is. Everybody knows what kosher is. Everybody knows what Yom Kippur is. Everyone knows what Hanukkah is. And believe it or not, a lot of people know what tefillin is. So it's just interesting to see if Moshe Rabbeinu came back now, he would see the people the same way. Even though maybe some of them don't know everything, but they would know something. So you see, God was gone for 3,333 years, and he's bringing Mashiach back now. We're still the same people. We haven't changed. And what keeps us together? Our unity, that we're as one, no matter who we are and what we are. Every time there's a problem, everyone shows up in it together. We're there. We're all in it together. All the Jews are always in it together. Whenever we get into any kind of trouble, it's like, you know, the trees there are trees in California, they're called sequoia trees, right? And if you would look underneath the ground, the sequoia trees the roots don't go very deep. But what do? they intertwine with the other roots. And this is interesting because if you think about that, they are the oldest trees that there are, and they're wide and they're tall, but their roots intertwine with each other. And if you would have to try to throw down one sequoia tree, you would throw down all the trees together because their roots are intertwined, which is interesting because that's like the Jewish people. You know, our lives are so intertwined. We're just like one. We become like the sequoia trees in the forest. You know, we're all in this together, you know, and nobody can completely, you know, change that. So let's go on to our first text in our new thing, okay? So the question is, will the world change or will it be different? Okay, like what is going to change in this world when Mashiach comes? How different is it going to be? Somebody can read text 1a.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay. Do not presume that in the Messianic age any facet of the world's nature will change or that there will be innovations in the work of creation. The world will continue according to its pattern.
So this is Maimonides. Maimonides is Rambam. Rambam is saying that the world is going to be the same natural world. Nothing much is going to change. And go continue reading on to text 1b.
The wolf will dwell with the lamb, the leopard will lie down with the young goat, the calf and the yearling will be with the lion, and a little child will lead them all.
So how is that possible? On one hand, the Rambam is saying that nothing's going to change. And on the other hand, the Rambam is saying that the wolf will dwell with the lamb. Like, what does that all mean? So look at 1c. You can continue reading on 1c and see how it does this. Maimonides.
So the one before, the difference was from Isaiah.
Yes, that's the right. I'm sorry. That was from Isaiah, and that is the prophecy of Isaiah. Okay. So if Isaiah has that kind of a prophecy, what is Rambam trying to say here? So let's see what Rambam has to say. 1c.
Okay. So we're back to Maimonides. The wolf will dwell with the lamb, the leopard will lie down with the young goat. These words are an allegory and parable. The interpretation of the prophecy is that the Jews will dwell at peace together with those wicked Gentiles who had sought to devour them like a wolf and a leopard. They will no longer steal or destroy, but live at peace with Israel. Similarly, other messianic prophecies of this kind are allegories. Only in the Messianic era will we understand their true meaning.
Okay, so he's basically saying the wolf will lie down with the lamb. He's saying it's an allegory because it says that the Jewish people is like a lamb and the wolf are all the other nations that want to devour them. So he's basically saying that there's going to be peace. And where does he get his information from? He gets it from the Talmud, and look at text number 2. You could continue reading, Ava, because it's part of the same idea.
Our sages taught in the Talmud, there will be no difference between the current age and the Messianic era, except the emancipation from our subjugation to the Gentile governments.
So basically what he's saying here is he's saying everything's going to happen naturally. And he gets that from Sanhedrin, which is the Talmud that says that there will be no difference between the current age and the Messianic age, except for one thing, is that we will not be under another country's rule. We will be able to rule on our own. This is what Maimonides is thinking at this point. So here we have Maimonides just saying basically that everything here is going to be natural. But what is Mashiach's job? Somebody wants to read text number 3?
I'll read.
Okay.
The Messianic king will arise and renew the Davidic dynasty, restoring it to its initial sovereignty. He will build the temple and gather the dispersed of Israel. In his days, the observance of all the statutes will return to their previous state.
Okay, so what is the job of the Mashiach? It's to rebuild the temple. Okay, so he's saying, so Mashiach's job is to build the temple and bring the Jews back to Israel. So we see, second. So we see that in text number 3, right? That's what we see in text number 3. So we know that before, the Jewish people are supposed to be doing 248 positive mitzvahs, and we are only doing 87 because most of those mitzvahs are the mitzvahs that we do during the time of the temple. So here's a little video about the temple so you can actually see.
God told the Jews at Sinai to build a temple.
Sorry, I just want to download it so I can actually show it to you better. I think it's a little.
So that his presence could dwell among them, a place to worship, to gather as a nation, to...
1 second. Let me go out for a second. Okay, I want to go back and try to give it to you in a different way because it's too small. Multimedia. Videos. Okay. I had it downloaded. Oh, here. Okay, so basically, this person's going to tell you a little bit about the temple. So let's look at it now because it's going to take too long. So I hope you can.
God told the Jews at Sinai to build a temple so that his presence could dwell among them, a place to worship, to gather as a nation, to receive atonement, inspiration, and instruction. Half a millennium later, God's desired location for a permanent home was revealed to King David in the ancient city of Jerusalem, atop a hillside known during Abrahamic times as Mount Moriah. David's son, King Solomon, completed a magnificent structure that attracted the title Beit HaMikdash and Beit HaPrira. It was fashioned with much gold, expensive woods, and precious materials. When it was completed in 827 BCE, the nation gathered to witness God's presence fill the temple. The mountain gained a new name, Har Habayit. At its summit, a stone building rose to enormous height. Within its gaping entrance was the Ulam, a lobby, beyond which was the Kodesh, furnished with 3 golden items, an altar for incense, a 7-branched menorah, and a table with racks for the showbread. At the sanctuary's far end, a separated area enclosed the temple's core, its most sacred location, the Kodesh HaKodashim, that held the Aron, the Ark of God, containing the tablets that Moses delivered at Sinai. The Ark of God rested upon a naturally protruding plateau, known as the Foundation Rock. Immediately outside the building, the courtyard of the Kohanim, priests, held a massive stone sacrificial altar with a lengthy access ramp. Nearby was the Kior, a cistern for rinsing hands and feet, and a platform for the Levites to chant psalms and play instruments. Further back, a larger area was designed for public assembly, known as the Woman's Courtyard. It included an extensive wooden balcony for women. The nation would gather 3 times each year to celebrate the festivals of Pesach, Shavuot, and Sukkot. The compound was surrounded by a massive wall and contained a series of steps, numerous gateways, and guard posts. The temple's layout was exceptionally efficient, with compartments and chambers for every possible need, such as storage areas for wood, oil, and other materials, production and preparation areas, rooms for clothing, for weaponry in case of attack, ritual immersion pools, sleeping and eating areas, tool and instrument reserves, lockers for the priests, a charity room, a hall for Torah study, a chamber for the Sanhedrin, a lounge for temple officials, a repair workshop, animal holdings, ticket stations, and so on. There were separate entrances for distinct purposes, an oversight system, and honor guards. A small stream ran beneath the temple, which was used to maintain cleanliness. The temple stood for 4 centuries. It was destroyed by the Babylonian army in 423 BCE, rebuilt in 349 BCE, and stood for 4 centuries more until it was destroyed by the Romans in 69 of the Common Era. Through his prophets, God promised the Jews a third and eternal temple in the Messianic era, from which his presence will spread to the world, embracing all of humanity.
Okay, so let's look at, okay, so here's basically the idea that the temple will be built. And anyone want to read text number 4?
I can read
I can continue.
Okay, go ahead.
In the nations of the world, or if the nations of the world knew how beneficial the holy temple was for them, they would have surrounded it with fortification in order to guard it.
So that he's basically saying this is a medrash in Bamidbar, basically saying that if the nations really understood what the temple was about, they would probably guard it, because this was the holiest site that had ever been. Okay, so here is, and basically what it is, it's not just for the Jewish people, it's also a house for everybody. So here's the word of Yeshayahu. So this is Yeshayahu ben Amos prophesied concerning Judah and Yerushalayim. It shall be at the end of days that the mountain of God's home shall be firmly established at the top of the mountains. It shall be raised above the hills, and all the nations shall stream to it. So it's saying basically that when Mashiach comes, it won't only be for everyone, for all the Jewish people, it will also be for every single person. Many people shall go, and they shall say, come, let us go up God's mountain to the house of God of Jacob, and let him teach us his ways, and we will go on his paths. And if you see now, interesting, if you see Yerushalayim, it's not just a home of Jews. We see Christians are there, and Muslims live there, and everyone else lived there. Could you imagine if there was the house of God, and all the different nations would come, and they would see what it is, and they would pray to God in the right way. Okay, so the other thing is that not just, because do we understand that right now there's only 2 tribes in the Jewish people, because the 10 tribes, remember that they were taken out from Israel during the first temple. There was 10 other tribes besides Judah and Benjamin, and a little bit of the tribe of Levi stayed, but everyone else was taken out. And so there are many, many different people that talk about the 10 tribes that we don't know where they are. Actually, everyone says different things about the 10 tribes. And in text number 6, somebody is going to say something about the 10 tribe, which is in the Mishnah of Sanhedrin. And anybody want to read what it says about the 10 tribes?
Sure. The 10 tribes are not destined to return. As it is stated, God cast them into another land like this day. Deuteronomy 29:27. Just as the day passes, never to return, so have they gone into exile, never to return. This is the view of Rabbi Akiva.
So Rabbi Akiva says that they're not coming back. Okay, what does Rabbi Eliezer say?
Rabbi Eliezer stated, like this day, just as the day darkness and then brightens So the 10 tribes who experience darkness will in the future experience light.
So he's basically saying just the opposite. He's saying that the 10 tribes will return. And I have this little video about somebody talking about the 10 tribes, the lost tribes, and how some people say that they're in certain places. Let's see.
The nation of Israel is the bigger picture, is the wider completion of our nation. Today, if you go and you take an example from a Jewish person, so it's wonderful that that Jewish observant person is keeping the Torah and following the rules, keeping Shabbat and eating kosher and going to the mikveh and learning Torah and praying in the synagogue, wearing tzitzit, putting tefillin. All those wonderful things are really awesome and fantastic, but still we need to remember that we lack of something. We have only a portion of the complete nation of Israel. Only 2 tribes are serving right now, and other 10 tribes are lost in the depths of exile. And it's not that we're not complete without them. The majority of our nation is still missing. We're still looking for them. We're still hoping for them to come, to rise from the depths. I have students all around the world, and I'm talking about thousands of them, and I'm answering and replying to messages on daily basis, and I can recognize those people are Israelim. They have an Israeli soul. They're contacting and reaching out and asking questions, and where should I start, and what should I do, and where should I begin, and should I convert or not convert, and we're a whole tribe here, we're all family, all my family are like this, like that, we're learning Torah. And like, what in the world? Like, hey guys, you're in Nigeria. Hey guys, you're in Poland. You're talking to me from Germany. What are you talking about? Like, no, yes, I am from this, from that, from the Philippines, from Saudi Arabia, from Jordan. People in Jordan that claims to be Israelis, they know that they're Israelis. How do they know that? Something in their heart is screaming. Now, it's hard to believe. You say like, what? How can I know? He looks Muslim, he looks Christian, he looks from that nation, he has a dark skin, he's got like whatever, he's looks foreign. Like all the thoughts, all the assumptions that you put are based on your eyes, on your physical eyesight, on what you see, visualize with your eyes. But in reality, listen to the hearts of people. Try to understand what's going on in their spirits, and then you're going to understand what in the world is going on here. Because in reality, you're talking about millions of people, hundreds of millions of people that are actually the families and tribes of Israel, the lost tribes that blend into the nations, and their
So he basically has his own opinion on this, and he's saying here that he feels that the 10 lost tribes of Israel are out there. There are many different opinions on that. There are some opinions there are some coming back. Some people say that one of the lost tribes of the Philistines who came back to Israel. Another one can say that they are in China or in Saudi Arabia. There's many different tribes that say that they come from Jews. So we slowly see actually that there are people that are coming back, and we understand that these could be the 10 lost tribes. There was a documentary, I think 5 or 6 years ago, I don't remember when, that talked about the 10 lost tribe and who they thought that they were by visiting different places in the world and seeing that they had traditions just like Jews did. So you can look it up and see for yourself, but this was just a very interesting point that he was making, is that he does see different people that might be from the 10 lost tribes. Okay, so let's go on to text number 7. Did I skip it? 6.2. Okay, text number 7 about what's going to happen with the courts that will come back. So it says, I will restore your judges as in the days of old, and your counselors as in the beginning. Afterwards, you shall be called the city of righteousness, faithful city. So definitely we understand that the Sanhedrin will come back. We talked about this a couple of times already. And these were the 71 judges, and the last that we knew of them, they were in Tiberia. Okay, so now let's look, does someone want to read text number 8?
I can do it.
Okay, go ahead.
Originally, when the Holy Temple was built, the Supreme Sanhedrin would hold session in its chamber of hewn stone. When things went awry, the Sanhedrin went into exile, convening in various locations, 10 in total, the last being Tiberias. Since then, the Sanhedrin has not reconvened. We have a tradition that the Sanhedrin will be restored in Tiberias first, and from there it will relocate to the temple.
So we're looking at it that the Sanhedrin will reconvene, but they will start in Tiberia, which is Tiberias, I think, in English. Okay, and now we know that the Sanhedrin made our calendar so that we don't need to use an everyday calendar. Now, does anybody ever hear of the thing called Armageddon?
Yes, in
Okay.
movies.
Right, in movies, exactly. So this is actually interesting because after we look at the idea of Gog and Magog, actually, which they use, and the funny thing is where did we get this word Armageddon? Is because they were talking about, they mentioned Gog and Magog, and Har Megodon was mentioned there. So I guess that's what they got this Armageddon for, but that really didn't have to do with anything. But we know that Jews believe that there is a war, called the War of Gog and Magog. Gog is be the king, and Magog is the city. So look at text number 9. He'll talk about that. This is Rambam. We'll talk about that and explain that it's not really what it seems. Okay, anyone want to read text number 9?
Sure, I can.
Actually,
Straightforward.
one second. I think we skipped. No, we didn't. Okay, go ahead. Go on.
A straightforward interpretation of the prophet's words appears to imply that the war of Gog and Magog will occur at the beginning of the Messianic age. Before this war, a prophet will arise to inspire Israel to be upright and to prepare their hearts, as it stated Malachi 3:23. Behold, I am sending you Elijah. Some sages stated that Elijah coming will precede the coming of Mashiach. All these and similar matters cannot be definitely known until they occur, for these matters are not clarified in the prophet's words.
So we don't really, he's saying basically that we don't really understand what that all means. If it's a real war, or it could be a war of ideas, or it could be a spiritual war. We don't know exactly what that means. All we know is that there's a person named Gog, and he's from the country of Magog. And there's some kind of war that would happen, but no one knows exactly what that means. Even Maimonides doesn't really express that as something that's very important for the times of Mashiach. Okay, so we see though in text number 10, you can continue reading because it's part of the same Gog and Magog.
Sure. Rabbi Yochanan taught in the name of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai.
So this is Talmud, okay? Talmud. Okay, go ahead.
Suffering as a wayward child at home is more difficult than the war of Gog and Magog.
So you see the word doesn't sound too difficult.
Right. For it is stated, a psalm of David, when he fled from his son Absalom. Psalm 3.1. And the next verse reads, God, how numerous are my enemies, may have risen against me. Psalm 3.2. By contrast, regarding the war of God, Gog and Magog, it's stated in Psalm 2.1, why are the nations in an uproar? Why do the people speak emptiness? It does not state how numerous are my enemies.
So it sounds like here that it's Gog and Magog is not about enemies, right? It's more about people that speak empty words. So it doesn't seem like it's a war of like, like I understand why I'm going to war. No, it sounds like it's just a war that people are doing that's not really understandable. It's like a silly war. Because he says that when David was fighting with his own son, Avshalom, it was worse. And this seems like it's a war of emptiness. So it didn't seem like something that really scares people. And if we look at the next figure 6.3, we see, actually, before we go on to that, I just want to go with this idea of Gog and Magog. The Rebbe always said that the war of Gog and Magog probably already happened because we don't need any more wars. We have enough wars. Okay, so we're done with wars. So here is the biblical things. Remember, we talked about war, crime, poverty, scarcity, disability. Okay, so these are all the different prophecies that we saw. So now he's asking, is it all going to be miraculous or is it all going to be natural? Let's see what Maimonides has to say. Anybody want to read this long one?
I can do it.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay. The Messianic era is defined as the time in which sovereignty will revert to Israel, and the Jewish people will return to the land of Israel.
Doesn't sound miraculous yet. Okay, continue.
In those days, it will be extremely easy for people to make a living. A minimum of labor will produce tremendous benefits. This is the meaning of our sage's statement that, in the future, the land of Israel will bring forth ready-baked rolls and fine woolen garments.
Do we have that already?
Yeah.
Right? I think so, right? Go get a loafa, right? Okay.
The great benefit of that era is that we will experience respite from the oppression that prevents us from doing good.
Mhm.
There will be a widespread increase of wisdom, as it is stated, for the earth will be filled with the knowledge of God.
Okay, we're still waiting for that moment.
War and battle will cease, as it is stated. Nation will not lift up sword against nation. The human lifespan will be lengthened as a result of the absence of stress and suffering.
Mhm.
We do not long and hope for the Messianic era simply because we desire an abundance of produce and property, or because we wish to ride horses or drink wine to the accompaniment of music, as some confused people think. Rather, our prophets and pious yearned for that era because then the righteous will assemble and good conduct and wisdom will prevail.
Mhm.
It will be possible then to observe the entire Torah without worry or fear.
Right, exactly. So in other words, what he's basically saying is that it sounds like a little bit of miraculous, but not really. But it's a possibility to happen naturally. This is how he's trying to put this point. But there's just one little thing that he's forgetting that is very miraculous. What is that? In the time of Mashiach, what will happen? Anybody? The biggest miracle.
The
The dead
soul
will
coming
come
back.
back.
Excellent. You both said it, I think, at the same time.
Yeah.
The resurrection of the dead. Exactly. Doesn't that sound like a miracle to you? So on one hand, you can say, yes, it's miraculous. But if we want to be a skeptic, we can say, well, we have cloning nowadays, so maybe people can just be brought back that way. Interesting, huh? Okay, so we see, it sounds like to me that it will be a natural, miraculous way. Okay, so basically we're saying miracles are possible. Does someone want to read text number 12? This is also continuation of the Rambam.
I can read.
Okay, go ahead.
It's important to realize that when I stated that certain prophecies are to be understood allegorically, this is not absolute.
So in other words, the Rambam is going back on what he said before, and this is a letter that the Rambam wrote later in his life, just to clarify that we don't know, because you have to remember that the Rambam lived many years before us. And so if he had to come back here now, what did he live in 11th century? So could you imagine he came back now and he would see all this? Of course, it would look miraculous to him. But all of a sudden he starts to think, maybe I'm being a little bit, iffy here. Maybe it's not true. Maybe there is going to be actually those things happening. Okay, continue.
No prophetic communication informed me that they are allegorical, nor did I receive a tradition from the sages and prophets that these particular matters are parables. Let me explain what brought me to the allegorical approach. I strive to bring harmony between the Torah and human intellect, which is why I explain things in a natural way whenever possible. However, when it's self-evident that the connotation is miraculous indeed, and it's not possible to interpret otherwise, I said that it's a miracle. The bottom line is that regarding specific prophecies about the redemption that do not involve the fundamentals of our Jewish faith, it matters not whether one believes that they are literal or allegorical. We will have to wait for their realization. May it occur speedily in our days to discover whether these statements refer to actual miracles or are simply allegories for natural changes.
So he basically is saying that he's kind of going back on this point that maybe it is true that the wolf will sit with the lamb. Maybe it is true that all these things will happen. He doesn't know for sure. But one thing for sure that he does know that is a miracle, and even now we can see that as a miracle, is again the resurrection of the dead. So someone want to read text 13?
I could.
Okay,
I just need to make it bigger. The resurrection of the dead will occur as a miraculous event, as we have explained. However, the credibility of such an event can only be based on the words of a prophet. Now, at the time of the giving of the Torah, nearly all of humankind denied the transmission of prophecy from God to humans. They also denied that God could perform miracles, considering them instead acts of magic and trickery. Indeed, the Egyptians denied that perform godly miracles and tried to show that they could turn stick into snakes by other means. Exodus 7:12. The Jews themselves were influenced by this worldview, evidenced by their expressing astonishment that God revealed himself to them at Mount Sinai, Deuteronomy 5:21, indicating that they had considered prophecy impossible. How then could such a miraculous event that relies exclusively on belief in prophecy be conveyed to those who were not ready to accept the concept of prophecy or the concept of miracle? When God wished to give us the Torah, he first had to produce the great miracle recorded through the Torah to authenticate thereby the prophecy of the prophets and the possibility of miracles. For that reason, at this stage, God only divulged the concept of reward and punishment that occurs within the scope of nature. God did not mention anything about resurrection. This continued until the passage of generations. The belief in prophecy and miracles became verified, and there remained no doubt about their truth. At that point, the prophets shared with us that which God had informed them regarding the resurrection of the dead. By that time, it was easy to accept this belief.
Right. So in other words, he's saying here that at the way beginning, people could not believe in miracles, and they were saying that it was done in a certain manner that they were able to express it. But then when God took the Jews out of Egypt, little by little, he was teaching them that yes, it is okay to have miracles, and yes, it is a possibility, so that way, once the prophets came along, they were able to tell them, yes, there is something called the resurrection of the dead. Yes, there is miracles. Now, I'm looking at it even on a deeper level, is that at the time that the Jews were going out of Egypt and the time that they were prophets, there was no way that they can think that naturally that people could be resurrected in a natural way. And it's interesting that God does not do a miracle for no reason. There has to be a reason for each of the miracles that he does, but he also uses a natural means to make those miracles happen. He doesn't just do it for no reason whatsoever. Just want to see where this is from. Okay, it doesn't say here. Oh, here it is. Okay, so this is also Maimonides. And now we will go on to what the Rebbe says. That's text number 14. No, that's still Maimonides. I'm sorry. So Maimonides says in text 14 is that you should view yourself at all times as equally balanced with merits and faults, and view the world similarly equal balance with merits and faults. Therefore, if you perform even one mitzvah, you tip the balance, your own and that of all humankind, and affect personal and global deliverance and salvation. So basically what he's saying is that one little mitzvah to tip the scale is what's going to bring Mashiach. You just need that one more mitzvah to do. And the Rebbe says how to bring Mashiach. We do it through acts of goodness and kindness. And this is, let me just stop the share here. Okay, so we do it through acts of goodness and kindness. And we know that God will be the one that rules over the world. And understanding from here is that, yes, it may be a very miraculous time, but it has to be within a framework of nature. The only thing that we still cannot understand, number one, we cannot understand how God is going to change the world and make it so that everybody recognizes him. We still can't understand that. We still can't understand how everyone's going to be so nice to each other all of a sudden. But I think that if God brings out his godliness and we see his godliness, then of course everybody will accept God as the king. And of course, all of this will fall into place. But the question is how that's going to happen. We have no idea. We can't even understand how that's going to be. And now, especially because we are in a time that's the 3 weeks leading up to the temple's destruction, which is Tisha B'Av.
Say that again. Sorry, Rebbetzin. The mic cut out.
Okay, so now we are in the 3 weeks leading up to the time of Tisha B'Av, which is the 9th of Av, which is the day that the temple was destroyed. It's an opportune time when we say when something is destroyed, that means it's a time for rebuilding. Just like when a person destroys a house for the sake of rebuilding a new beautiful house, a much more beautiful house, he needs to destroy the old house. So here we see this is the time of the year that things are actually, it's interesting because it's kind of like a pun in a way, because we see that a lot of structures are being destroyed. Of course, it's a terrible thing that happened, but we understand that from the destruction, we get rebuilding. So in Mitzvah Hashem, God should give us that all the terrible things that are going on in this world, including Miron, and then the people that fell from the, I think it's Sons group of people, and also the Surfside falling structure, that God should help, that this should be the end of it, that all of this falling should turn around and start being rebuilding. And we should be able to rebuild this world to a messianic time and rebuild the Beis Hamikdash speedily in our days. Thank you. And anyone have